Okay, welcome to our book club on toxic parents. A lot of activity happened this week since we last met, right? For those of you who had time, I sent many different little videos for you to watch to better understand these different personality types that come, the outcome of different parenting types. And then I also posted today this parenting type, the first parenting type, Shunya's mother, so you could hear from her point of view how she sees, being a mother. So this will be, we'll take our time actually going through this as we read the book and using these tools that I'm giving to you over the week to introspect. You can use them as introspection tools. I also just want to remind again, the focus of the book club and the purpose is to focus on yourself. So the types of questions that would be appropriate are when you're asking something, when you're trying to better understand a parent as it relates to you, not to understand, some larger issue around parenting. If your parent was neglectful and you have a specific question you're trying to figure out, it would be appropriate to ask something about that, but not sharing about your parent. So you'd be like, I'm wondering if you're neglectful, are they also like this? Or could it be like this? That would be appropriate. It's very tempting to be like, well, my mom was like this and that and that and that, and can you help me? So then all of a sudden we go, that's a boundary issue, which if you had a neglectful parent, you're going to have issues with understanding healthy boundaries. So a boundary issue would be that you ask something too personal in a book club, right? So then the other boundary issue is that you share something too personal. Either you ask something too personal or you share something too personal. Another boundary issue is that you ask something way too broad that has nothing to do with you. It's just you're curious. That's a boundary issue in terms of respecting everybody else's time. So if you need to really ask because it has to do with you trying to understand how that type of parent affected you, then ask it. That's appropriate, okay? So we'll learn over time about the questioning, because you can get a lot more out of it if you focus your question in the way I just described. Focus on if you need to get something out of it specifically to understand how that parent affected you. Okay? And as I said last time, this is going to be very triggering. It already has been probably for a lot of you, right? When you're like, oh my God, my parent was like that. I didn't realize that. And oh my God, that means this, this, and this. So do whatever you need to do to process that, either with a therapist or through journaling or whatever your technique is that works for you to process your feelings, so you're not bringing it here and dumping it on everybody at the book club. Okay? And if it's too triggering for you, you can also just say, okay, that's enough for today. I will tap out, and I'll watch it at another time, a recording. Because sometimes when it's live and you don't know what's coming and you hear something and it catches you off guard, you can't even hear what the rest is happening, right? Because you're so triggered. That's normal and to be expected. We're talking about very emotional, hard things that sometimes you aren't aware of, and so when that comes up, you can be compassionate to yourself and say, okay, that's enough for me today. I'll listen to it at a later time and do what I need to do to nurture myself. Okay? So I will continue to post some more things when I get time, so you can use those as introspection tools to understand yourself and the childhood you had and how it has an impact on you. And I'm posting those in Kajabi. So if you are registered for the book club, you'll be getting an email that says, like a notification that there's something new there. And if you want to share with each other, like discuss with each other, that's a place to do it. In that discussion forum, you can just type in what you want to say there. Okay, so I'm going to start with the introduction, okay? And that's on page, it's not numbered. So last week, remember we just went over who are toxic parents, right? And she gave a description of different types of toxic parents. And now I'm going to get into the introduction. So the beginning part says, sure, my father used to hit me, but he only did it to keep me in line. I don't see what that has to do with my marriage falling apart. Gordon, 38, a successful orthopedic surgeon, came to see me when his wife of 6 years left him. He was desperate to get her back, but she told him that she wouldn't ever consider coming home until he sought help for his uncontrollable temper. She was frightened by his sudden outbursts and worn down by his relentless criticism. Gordon knew he had a hot temper and that he could be a nag, but still he was shocked when his wife walked out. I asked Gordon to tell me about himself and guided him with a few questions as he talked. When I asked him about his parents, he smiled and painted a glowing picture, especially of his father, a distinguished Midwestern cardiologist. If it weren't for him, I wouldn't have become a doctor. He's the best. His patients all think that he's a saint. I asked him what his relationship with his father was like now. He laughed nervously and said, "It was great," until I told him I was thinking about going into holistic medicine. You'd think I wanted to be a mass murderer. I told him about 3 months ago, and now every time we talk, he starts ranting about how he didn't send me to medical school to become a faith healer. It really got bad yesterday. He got upset and he told me I should forget I was ever a part of his family. That really hurt. I don't know. Maybe holistic medicine isn't such a good idea. While Gordon was describing his father, who was obviously not as wonderful as Gordon would have liked me to believe, I noticed that he began to clasp and unclasp his hands in a very agitated way. When he caught himself doing this, he restrained himself by placing his fingertips together in the way that professors often do at their desks. It seemed a gesture he might have picked up from his father. I asked Gordon whether his father had always been so tyrannical. No, not really. I mean, he yelled and he screamed a lot. And I got spanked once in a while, like any other kid. But I wouldn't call him a tyrant. Something about the way he said the word spanked, some subtle emotional change in his voice struck me. I asked him about it. It turned out that his father had, quote unquote, spanked him 2 or 3 times a week with a belt. It hadn't taken much for Gordon to incur a beating, a defiant word, a below par report card, or a forgotten chore were all sufficiently venal crimes. Nor was Gordon's father particular about where he beat his child. Gordon recalled being beat on his back, his legs, his arms, his hands, and his buttocks. I asked Gordon how badly his father had physically hurt him. Gordon, I didn't bleed or anything. I mean, I turned out okay. He just needed to keep me in line. Susan, that's the therapist. But you were scared of him, weren't you? Gordon, I was scared to death. But isn't that the way it's supposed to be with parents? Susan, Gordon, is that how you'd want your children to feel about you? Gordon avoided my eyes. This was making him extremely uncomfortable. I pulled my chair closer and continued gently. Your wife is a pediatrician. If she saw a child in her office with the same marks on his body that you had on yours from one of your father's spanking, would she be required by law to report it to the authorities? At the realization, he whispered, I'm getting a terrible knot in my stomach. Gordon's defenses were down. Though he was in terrible emotional pain, he had uncovered for the first time the primary, long-hidden source of his temper. Remember how it started, his bad temper? So if you got beaten as a child, it's going to have to come out somehow, you know? So it's not like you get beaten and you just take it on and you're a fine, peaceful person. So either it's going to come out on your wife, on your kids, on the mailman. It has to burst out somehow because that's a samskara that got put on you, in you, you know? And so he didn't realize, actually. I mean, his wife left him. She said, I'm done because of his temper, right? So, but he doesn't know where it's coming from. So he was beaten. Have you ever heard of that saying, hurt people, right? If you're hurt, what else do you have to give somebody other than you're hurt? Same thing with physical. And when I used to work with kids, what would happen is they already were doing it. They already were beating other kids. Usually their younger brother or sister, or like a little kid in school, they'd bully them, or the family pet. It already happened. The samskara got put in there, So Vedic psychology-wise, that's what happens. So, yeah, he said he didn't bleed or anything, right? So then Gordon realized, and he said, I'm getting a knot in my stomach, right? His defenses were down. Though he was in terrible emotional pain, he had uncovered for the first time the primary, long hidden source of his temper. He had been containing a volcano of anger against his father since childhood, and wherever the pressure got too great, he would erupt at whoever was handy, usually his wife. You see, the way it works is that his father beat him, right? These were not two brothers fighting, right? It was a little boy, innocent, and who could not fight back, and a big father. And when you're little, your father looks like a giant, right? So then that blueprint got put in him as a samskara. So now what he got, the message he got was, I should beat up on people who are less than me. He won't go for somebody stronger or bigger than him, because the message was, pick on the small guy, the innocent one. So he's probably bigger and stronger than his wife, so that works. He's bigger and stronger than if he has a more senior position, he'll bully the younger people who report to him. He'll, even if he can't punch them, he'll use his words, So this volcano erupting, it's not that it can just go to everybody. Like, he probably wouldn't do it to his boss, because the boss is like filling the role of father, So the samskara is particularly getting triggered by the people who are less than him, in a lower position, either because they're younger or less senior, like in terms of the job, or they're actually just like a little kid. But there's someone, or a wife, who maybe they're the same age, but she's smaller than him, so he can beat her. So that's what he learned from his father. And then that's how it comes out. So I knew what we had to do. This is what the therapist was saying. We need to acknowledge and heal the battered little boy inside of him. When I got home that evening, I found myself still thinking about Gordon. I kept seeing his eyes fill with tears as he realized how he had been mistreated. Now, what I want to say is that's very rare in therapy, when somebody can quickly get an insight about how badly they're mistreated. I mean, she just said a couple things. You saw how he was rationalizing. It wasn't that bad. He just had to keep me in line. And, I wasn't bleeding or anything. And my dad was amazing. That's the norm. And sometimes I'll hear that for years. We will have the conversation for years, to the point that the client will get angry at me for trying to say, you were abused. And I would say the same thing this therapist said, like, if somebody saw that, would you call that in? Have to call that into the state and make a child abuse claim? That's what she was asking. And he's like, yes. So when sometimes even that, they'd be like, I don't know, maybe, or no, but he was tired, or he was overworked, or they still rationalize, So this is a very amazing insight that this guy had. And usually this goes on, and you'll defend, because the child, what happens when the child is beat is they become wired then to pay hyper-vigilant attention to the parent and watch every last thing about them, and they learn to defend them. They learn to defend the parent. So that's what he was doing at first. He's defending the parent, but they also watch every micro movement. Oh, his eyebrow went like that. Or, that means you're about to get beat. They watch every last little thing, and they become very good at anticipating and even guessing, when that next thing's going to happen to them. So for him, not only did he have that, which he didn't talk about, but he had, what goes along with that is this part of defending them. He had a hard day. Like, why should you know if you're 5, if your parent had a hard day? That's not your job. Your job is to be playing outside in the yard with your friends. If your dad had a hard day, that's between him and the wife. They talk about it behind closed doors. He should be there for you, playing with you. He should go play with the ball and throw the ball with you and all that. So the fact that he knows all these different rationalizations, the way he got those ideas, it was just to keep me in line. I didn't bleed. That's actually what his parents said or didn't say in so many words to him. He understood that he needed to be kept in line, and he empathized with them and agreed with them. Why? Because the other parent didn't step in and say, hell no, don't lay a hand on him with that belt. he didn't need to be kept in line by using a belt. You could have sat down with him and discussed the consequences of his behavior, but you never should hit him like that. But because that didn't happen, the other parent didn't step in. Even though it doesn't say it, it's obvious because of all his defenses, how he's describing it, means he got no other samskara other than abuse is okay. Either the other parent wasn't there, but most often what happens, the types of parents that match up together, the one's abusive one and the other one lets it happen. They'll be literally in the room and they don't say anything. So the message he got is, well, the two people who care for me the most, who are supposed to love me the most, they both think it's okay for me to be hit with a belt a few times a week. Not only the one who's doing it, but the one who's watching it and allowing it. So then his message is, oh, that is to keep me in line. Like the father was probably hitting him and saying, this is to keep you in line. You have a fresh mouth. Don't talk like that to me. Don't talk back. And the mom's sitting there sipping her tea. She didn't say anything, or she's in the other room. She's not bothered by it. So that's why he got the message, and that's why he's so strongly defending the father. And when I'm working with clients and we get onto this topic, which many people have been abused by their parents and don't realize it, they will come with every defense, and they keep coming back stronger and stronger. And sometimes it gets so ridiculous. I'm like, really? Seriously, you're saying that you think that's true? Because it's so deep in them, they've never questioned the thing they're saying. They've actually never questioned. I'm like, let's just say that again. And sometimes they have a child themselves. I'm like, would you be okay saying that about your child? That they should be hit in the face with a belt to keep them in line? And they'd be like, oh, no, not my child. I'm like, so then why was it okay to be done to you? Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, but.
Is about this for a child to accept this type of reality as if it's like the absolute, because the child doesn't know anything else, and then this becomes the normal, let's say. So how can happen that this scenario can be somehow crumble, let's say, change the change the perception about, for example, in this case, his own. This is only through therapy, or can happen somehow by seeing somebody else, or by comparing with somebody else. But still, the realization doesn't come so easily. I think that's why I want to see what you can add on that.
Maybe by your own child. Sometimes you get an insight when your own child tells you, maybe says to you, that hurt me, or something. When you, like, sometimes you, maybe, but, or it could be through some other person telling you, like a parent said, you just hit your kid with a belt, or something like that. Mm-hmm. But usually it just gets passed on, generation after generation. The same thing happens, and you think it's normal, and you get mad if someone tells you it's not normal, and you'll marry somebody just like the person. If you're the abuser, then you'll marry somebody just like the person who permitted the abuser.
Okay.
So the abusive type will be attracted to the more passive type who just lets it happen. So the way to get out of it is, but you have to. Usually, you're coming to therapy with a problem. And the problem is not that I was abused in childhood. Nobody comes with that problem, not even kids who are abused in childhood. So you're coming because, like this guy, his wife just left him, and he can't figure out why. You see what I mean? So it's going to be something that's very painful, and then you might come to therapy. But to realize this pattern, when that's all you know, and those first 7 years of life, that's when you're writing your dictionary of what the rules are. So love is when I get hit by the belt at least 3 times a week. Love is when my mom watches it happen and doesn't say anything. Love it so then when you go into its life and you start perpetuating that pattern until you basically end up with someone who you care about and they're going to leave you to that extent, you probably wouldn't look at it. And then even when that happened, he's trying to convince the therapist it's not a big deal.
Okay.
So that's why I'm doing this, to help people who maybe can get some insight into what happened to them and why their relationships aren't going so well as adults. Yeah. That might instigate, or I don't know what the word, inspire people to actually start going to therapy. When you start hearing these stories and you can relate and go, oh, that's something I need to work on.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So the therapist said she was still thinking about him, right? When she got home that evening, she found herself still thinking about Gordon. I kept seeing his eyes fill with tears as he realized how he had been mistreated. I thought about the thousands of adult men and women with whom I had worked whose daily lives were being influenced, even controlled by patterns set during childhood by emotionally destructive parents. So in the Vedic psychology terminology, patterns, anytime you see patterns or programs, that's what we call samskaras, right? These are your patterns that are set in childhood. So the Western terminology, they don't have that same term, they don't call it that. They say patterns or programs or some program, but it's actually your samskaras. And I like to call it that because then that means we understand more where it's located, how it behaves, what we can do to get out of it, right? So it's important for those of you who don't know about samskaras that those are in your chitta, which is like not your conscious mind, right? It's your subconscious mind. You're not aware of these programs that got put in you, and they work on autopilot all the time, and they don't change over time just because you're getting older. This idea like time heals all wounds, that's not true. Time conceals your wounds, but it becomes what we call your personality, is what happens to you in those first 7 years of life. That is your personality. And so that's what the samskaras are when she's saying programs, So he said she said that even controlled by patterns set during childhood by emotionally destructive parents. See, sometimes it's even worse if they're emotionally abusive to you. The physical abuse is horrible, for sure. And the emotional abuse is also, sometimes they say, well, they said some mean things, but they never hit me. It wasn't that bad. Never hit me. But when you hit with a word, that you never forget. Whereas if you got hit on the arm by a belt, that's going to be a bruise and it's going to heal. And it's still painful that a father could do that to you because his job is supposed to protect, and he actually was the attacker. He did the opposite of his role. But the word, it would just ring in your ears. I have some clients who are still hearing the abusive thing that their mother or father said to them sometimes. The actual thing is ringing in their ears. They can't get it out. And it's just torturing them. And when that happens, oftentimes we don't even realize it's happening, but we keep ourselves so busy in some way that we never have to sit quiet enough to hear what's actually going on in our head. And when you do it, sometimes it's so painful to realize that was actually mom. And she made you think that or feel that from these very mean words she said, And we're running for it, running away from that the rest of our life, through getting in a series of abusive relationships maybe to avoid the pain, or becoming like the ultra helper so we avoid that pain, or we're emotionally eating, we're doing drugs. There's so many ways that we're traveling the world, but we just can't stop. There's some way that we're avoiding that those mean words that got put in our chitta, And we don't realize it until you slow down enough and you try to look at it and say, what am I running from? And when you hear it, you're like, oh my God, Sometimes it happens, especially if you're on the spiritual path, you're doing bhakti yoga, you're meditating, you're doing japa, you're doing your meditation. Sometimes it's the hardest thing to do, and you don't realize why. I'm just so distracted. It's because these samskaras, that's their time to jump up, because your mind is calm, you're not trying to hold them down, and you're trying to meditate, and then all of a sudden, you might not get the exact samskara of the childhood abuse, but some negative thoughts are coming, or some really uncomfortable feelings are coming. So you can have more understanding of what's happening, to know, okay, most likely this is coming from my childhood. Even if a person in my adult life has triggered me, there's something coming from my childhood, and it's ready for the attention now that I can give to it, to nurture that. It's like your inner child crying out and saying, oh, he's finally calmed down, or she's finally calmed down enough, so I can be seen and heard and say what happened to me. Okay, so this therapist said she thought about all these thousands of men and women that she worked with whose daily lives were being influenced, even controlled, by patterns set during childhood by emotionally destructive parents. I realized there must be millions more who had no idea why their lives weren't working, yet who could be helped. And that's when I decided to write this book. What a service she did, really, to put it all out here so clearly, Why look back? That's a question I get all the time too. You know, a lot of times people don't come to therapy because they want to. Just like this guy. The wife is like, I'm done with this relationship unless you get help. So he's not coming willingly, like he's so excited to look at what his issues are. He doesn't think he has any issues. He's like, where's this anger coming from, you know? So, and then when you tell him it doesn't have to do with your wife, actually. It has to do with what happened to you in your childhood. That is such a trigger for people, you know? Number one, you saw him defending his childhood, but right here her question is, why look back? The past is the past. What happened was what happened. What happened, happened, and what can we do about it now? Let's move on. That is so common attitude in therapy at the beginning, you know, especially when you didn't come because you're excited to work on yourself, which is usually not the case, right? So it's like, don't make me go back there. What's the point? I'm just going to tell you all my issues and it's going to be really disturbing for me. You know, that why do it? Let's talk about now. And my wife has issues. She makes me so angry that I'm yelling at her all the time. So it's very hard to redirect. And it's going against all of your programming, because the programming that most people are getting is that you, as a child, are not important. What you think is not important and what you feel is not important. So now the therapist is saying, you are important and I want to hear all about it. It feels so uncomfortable, actually. And then when I get in there and we finally get to like something, usually when I ask a question, when we're getting into the actual feelings or the actual event that happened, somehow, you know, it's part of the defense mechanism, is you'll answer the question that has nothing to do with what I'm trying to go for. I'm trying to go for what happened in your childhood. How did you feel? What was your experience? And somehow we're analyzing dad again, or mom again, or now we're on your wife, what happened yesterday. And so I like bring it back in. And sometimes I'm very blunt. I'm like, okay, you just avoided it again. Do you see what you did to just avoid? Let's come back now to here. But your inner child is who I'm trying to talk to. And he's had a whole life of not being heard and seen. So he's not comfortable. That's why I say when you're getting in the hot seat, it feels like you're getting really exposed. And your inner child, sure as hell, is not going to trust me, because no other adult has made your inner child feel trusted. I mean, feel that he can trust or she can trust, you know? So it's very upsetting, actually, and you feel very vulnerable and exposed when we get to that place in the therapy. So why look back? Gordon's story is not unusual. I've seen thousands of patients in my 18 years as a therapist, both in private practice and in hospital groups, and a solid majority have suffered a damaged sense of self-worth because a parent had regularly hit them or criticized them. We can say hit them verbally, you know, hit them physically or hit them verbally through criticizing them, or joked about them. That's one thing you don't want to do to a kid. No, every kid might have something, their teeth are sticking out or their hair's not, you know, there's something about, nobody's a perfected being how you physically look, right? And so when parents sometimes joke about the kid, look at how she walks, her foot goes out, or whatever the thing is, this kid's fat, or this kid's too skinny, and they make a joke and they think it's funny. That kid will never forget that. And they'll make a whole complex around that. You know, so that's also abusive. You shouldn't make fun of your kids. And then guess who the bullies are at school? Then they go and do it to the other kids. And then you get called in and you get mad at your kid. Why are you bullying the other kid? It's like, because you bullied me. But the kid's too young to say it and to know it, you know? But it's like, that's what you taught me to do, you know? So the parent would joke about how stupid or ugly or unwanted they were, or overwhelm them with guilt, or sexually abuse them, or force too much responsibility on them, or desperately overprotected them. So there's all these ways you can kind of go wrong in parenting. And it's, if you think about it, like any job you've ever had, there's a certain number of hours you have to be on, right? Like 9 to 5, just say, typical job. That's 8 hours, and probably 5 days a week, maybe 6. So, and I don't know how many hours are in a week, but there's 24 hours in a day times 7, whatever that is. More than 100, so it's a lot of hours, right? And we only have to be on for 40, 8 times 5 for 40, right? And that's very hard. We make a lot of mistakes in the, but if you're a parent, you have to be 24/7, your whole life. Once that baby's born, you have to be on 24/7. So what I want to say is it's normal that the parents are going to make mistakes, that sometimes they are going to be neglectful, and sometimes they are going to be permissive, and sometimes they are going to be abusive. Like, you know, not every parent can have it perfectly together 24/7 for at least the first 18 years of your life. You know, so it might happen one time they just lose it and give you a push or a smack or something. I'm not saying it's good, but I'm saying if we just look at the tremendous amount of responsibility it is to be a parent, there's no off button. There's no like, I'm going on vacation, bye. I mean, if you're being an authoritative type, the good type of parent, you know, the responsible one who's loving and kind and makes boundaries and all that, there's no off. So how can you not make any mistakes all those times? So it's important when you're reading through all this and digesting it for you, what these stories mean to you, what the parenting type means to you. One is to realize your parents are not perfect. They're not all going to be in that perfect category of authoritative, you know, but in the authoritative category, when they make a mistake, they discuss it with you. They say, that was my bad. There's no excuse for me to just have pushed you. I feel so bad. You know, they would actually explain it and apologize and take responsibility, you know. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is, as you're understanding these parenting types, you'll see that your parents were probably a mix of a lot of them. It's not like they're only one, you know. It's not like I'm Pitta, that's it. No, I've got my Vata going on sometimes. I've got my Kapha going on. So same thing with this. So you're trying to figure out what was the predominant type that mom was or dad was, you know, or both, to see what the impact they made on you. But then once you start looking at it, you'll be like, actually, they had quite a bit of this one too. Yeah, fine. Figure that out and then see how that impacted you. Read through, understand the prototypes that Babaji and I made so you can understand and go, I'm kind of a mix of these two. And I actually had that too. You know, there's no one that's just so black and white like that. So that's the other point I want to make, that no parent's perfect and no parent is only just one. So that means we've got a mix of different ones at different times, you know. And we made those prototypes so you can easily call it out. Just like you're like, oh, Vata type, or oh, Sattvic. So many things can be Sattvic, right? So same thing with this. Okay, I'm being Shunya right now. I'm being a Shunya type, you know, or I'm being, you know, you can say the type and call it out easily, and that means a whole lot of different things. Okay. So we were on why look back, right? About the parents joking. And then there's many different ways you can kind of go wrong parenting. Like Gordon, few of these people made the connection between their parents and their problems. This is a common emotional blind spot. People simply have trouble seeing that their relationship with their parents has a major impact on their lives. Therapeutic trends, which used to rely heavily on the analysis of early life experiences, have moved away from the then and into the here and now. The emphasis has shifted to examining and changing current behavior, relationships, and functioning. I believe this shift is due to clients' rejection of the enormous amounts of time and money required for many traditional therapies, often for minimal results. So that's what we're doing in Vedic psychology. We're going to the root, to the deepest root of how these programs got put in you, and it takes a lot of time and a lot of money. There's no shortcut around it. If you want to uproot your personality, the faulty parts that are hurting you in your life today, that's not a short-term plan, you know. So it took a long time for that to get put in you, and you've been acting on it, reinforcing it, so it's going to take a long time to get out. So it takes a lot of patience and understanding of what the process is, what's actually happening, you know. The short-term therapies, it makes sense. They're cheaper because you don't have to do it very long, you know, and it's not you're not going to the root of your most painful problem. So you can get a relief, actually. There's many types of therapy that Babaji calls like cutting the grass. So the grass is growing up. In other words, you're getting triggered by some relationship you're in, and there can be some short-term help there that will help you get a relief, a temporary relief. But over time, you're like, oh my God, now I'm in another relationship and I'm doing the same thing, you know? Why are these women who are so controlling attracted to me? It's like, no, actually, why are you attracted to them? Because the non-controlling types, they were attracted to you, but you weren't attracted to them. So it's you, brother, you know, it's not them. So that's the idea, is that the eventually, when you've had enough of these kind of short-term reliefs, eventually when you come to the root, it's a relief. And that's how you know you're ready for it. Because a lot of times you just need some relief, you know, so there's lots of like energy work, energy healing, many different types of therapy like that. It's wonderful because in the moment you can get a good relief. But it's not changing your samskara. You have to go in with a precise tool to get in there and nurture at that level and reparent really at that level. And both are important. So many of my clients, I've recommended many different types of alternative therapy that's not going to get to the samskara, but it's going to calm them down enough so they can have a good day. You know, Many different types of therapies are for that. But it's just good to know the difference so you're not frustrated on why this isn't working. It's not designed to go to the root, you know? So that's what she's saying. This therapist is also saying. Okay, so she said, I'm a great believer in short-term therapy that focuses on changing destructive behavior patterns. But my experience has taught me that it's not enough to treat the symptoms. You must deal with the sources of those symptoms. That's samskaras, right? Childhood programming. Therapy is most effective when it proceeds down a double track, both changing your current, like self-defeating behavior, right? And disconnecting from the trauma of the past. So this is the first part of this book that Babaji has highlighted in his red. So I'll read it again, this part that Babaji thought, bingo, this is something important. He said, therapy is most effective when it proceeds down a double track, both changing current self-defeating behavior and disconnecting from the traumas of the past. Gordon had to learn techniques to control his anger, but in order to make permanent changes, ones that would stand up under stress, he had to go back and deal with the pain of the childhood. Our parents plant mental and emotional seeds in us, seeds that grow as we do. In some families, these are seeds of love, respect, and independence. But in many others, they are seeds of fear, obligation, or guilt. If you belong to this second group, this book is for you. As you grew into adulthood, these seeds grew into invisible weeds that invaded your life in ways you never dreamed of. Their tendrils may have harmed your relationships, your career, or your family. They have certainly undermined your self-confidence and self-esteem. I'm going to help you find those weeds and root them out. So what is a toxic parent? All parents are deficient from time to time. I made some terrible mistakes with my children, which caused them and me considerable pain. No parent can be emotionally available all the time. It's perfectly normal for parents to yell at their children once in a while. All parents occasionally become too controlling, and most parents spank their children, even if rarely. Do these lapses make them cruel or unsuitable parents? Of course not. Parents are only human and have plenty of problems of their own. And most children can deal with an occasional outburst of anger as long as they have plenty of love and understanding to counter it. So the point here is that if your parent lashes out, that's what I was saying, then they have to take accountability and say, my bad, I was having a really bad day, but that's no excuse for what I just did to you. I'm so sorry. You know, what I should have done was X. I should not have done that, and you didn't deserve that, and you didn't do anything wrong. If that's discussed, then the child will have the memory of getting the slap, but also have the memory right there that it got addressed, and the parent said, I was wrong, and that must have hurt you and scared you, and I'm so sorry. But there are many parents whose negative patterns of behavior are consistent and dominant in a child's life. These are the parents who do the harm. As I searched for a phrase to describe the common ground that these harmful parents share, the word that kept running through my mind was toxic. Like a chemical toxin, the emotional damage inflicted by these parents spread throughout a child's being. And as the child grows, so does the pain. What better word than toxic to describe parents who inflict ongoing trauma, abuse, and denigration on their children, and in most cases continue to do so even after their children are grown. There are expectations to the ongoing or repetitive aspects of this definition. Sexual or physical abuse can be so traumatic that often one single occurrence is enough to cause tremendous emotional damage, just one time. And I shouldn't have said just, you know, one time is enough to damage the psyche and the personality for the whole life. Unfortunately, parenting, one of our most crucial skills, is still very much a seat of the pants endeavor. Our parents learned it primarily from people who may not have done such a good job, their parents. Many of the time-honored techniques that have been passed down from generation to generation are, quite simply, bad advice masquerading as wisdom. Remember, spare the rod and spoil the child. What do toxic parents do to you? Whether adult children, okay, so now this section on this page 6, that question and that 2 paragraphs, Babaji underlined the whole thing in red. So he thought this was very important. Whether adult children of toxic parents were beaten when little or left alone too much, sexually abused or treated like fools, overprotected or overburdened by guilt, they almost all suffer surprisingly similar symptoms. Damaged self-esteem, leading to self-destructive behavior. And one way or another, they almost all feel worthless, unlovable, and inadequate. These feelings stem to a great degree from the fact that children of toxic parents blame themselves for their parents' abuse. Sometimes consciously, sometimes not. It is easier for a defenseless, dependent child to feel guilty for having done something bad to deserve daddy's rage than it is for that child to accept the frightening fact that daddy, the very protector, that's his job to protect, and that he can't be trusted. When these children become adults, they continue to bear these burdens of guilt and inadequacy, making it extremely difficult for them to develop a positive self-image. The resulting lack of confidence and self-worth can in turn color every aspect of their life. So I'm going to pause here because it's really heavy. I know we read a lot and there's a lot of things that might be getting triggered up. Does anybody have any questions about anything we read so far? Go ahead, Nyan Shri.
I was thinking if you can give any example of self-destructive behavior, how does it look like in the child or adult?
Many ways, depending on your prototype, personality prototype, but one is that you actually don't make friends. So you're hurting yourself. You get invited to a social thing, you don't go. Because you don't feel lovable, you don't feel like you even deserve to be invited or that people will even think you're interesting. So you're hurting yourself. You're kind of sabotaging yourself in ways like what would be normal as a kid is that you're treated with love, you're treated like you're interesting and you're worth spending time with. So then when somebody as an adult invites you to an event, of course you go. Why? Because you think you're valuable and they invited you and you're excited to share. But if you didn't get treated like that as a child, then you will kind of destruct yourself. You won't end up having very many friends because you won't even put yourself out to do it because you don't think people really care about you or they're interested in you. That's a subtle one, There's some more obvious ones like some people cut themselves. That's definitely self-destructive. Some people will sabotage intimate relationships. Like if you have a boyfriend or girlfriend or husband or wife, as soon as you start getting close, it's too scary. So you'll do something, not purposely, unconsciously, but the program is you create drama. You drop like a drama bomb as soon as it gets too intimate emotionally. So that's self-destructive. There's many ways, You don't take care of yourself, you don't do good self-care. So then your health suffers. So depending on like the prototype of those 4, you can see however your parent treated you, you're going to do it to yourself.
So the story of Gordon, he was beaten physically from his parents, and what was happening that he was in an adulthood, he was doing the same thing with the people who are less stronger than him. And if I was just thinking maybe if a girl is maybe physically abused, like beaten up so much, because I was thinking so what happens, like maybe the same behavior, or how does it look like? Because in a relationship with the husband looks more stronger than the women. So I'm not sure if the women also get more strong, and then they try to like be abusive to the husband, or what do they do?
Yeah, that's a good question. So typically with the man, he's going to be like the father, So he's going to learn, because most likely he was doing it to the wife too. So then he learned, okay, daddy beats mommy and daddy beats me, and that's love. So now becomes a man, and so then he beats the wife. And, if he has kids, he'll probably do it to the kids too. But the woman, if you're beat by the father, may not do that because she's the woman, you know. So if she gets married to a husband, unless she marries like a very weak man, but probably the man's going to be stronger, so she'll most likely be attracted to a man who will beat her. And she won't like a man who doesn't beat her. I've had many clients like that. They're already with the guy and they've described severe abuse. And I'm like, that's abusive, you know, that's abusive. And they're like, it only happened that one night he was drunk. And then as we keep talking, oh no, it happened last weekend too. You know, and it happened, and I'll even quote them because there's research that shows it takes 7 times that you have to leave the abuser 7 times before it sticks and you can really stay. And I'll say, so I think we're on the 3rd time now, you've tried, you know, because we're like in therapy, I'm like, okay. And I think they got the insight, but it's very hard for them to leave. They go back because that's their samskara, that's their program in their dictionary of what is love. And some women will say, he never hit me. And I'm like, well, but he's gaslighting you and he's twisting all the stories and he's controlling you so you can't even go out with a girlfriend for a drink. So the abuse will come in a more subtle way sometimes. It won't be the obvious hitting, but she'll pick someone who's like her father. That's a good question. Yeah. Because your opposite sex parent is your first love. So it's different. If it's a same sex parent, then it becomes, that's your guide of who you want to be like. If it's opposite sex, that's your first love. So you'll go for the partner who is the abuse versus being the abuser, you know. If you're a male and that's your male doing it to you, then you'll want to be like that. Not even want to, you just get programmed. But if you're a female, then you think, oh, that's love. Okay, that's romantic love. So then you go for the guy who does that in some way.
Jessica, I just got my book, and what page are you on now? I missed one session, so if you could tell me, please.
6.
That the lady, she also beats their children, like her children, like.
It could be, but most likely she'll marry the husband and he'll take care of that, and she won't do anything. She'll sit there and be like, of course, because that's what happened in my house. My father beat me, and my mother did nothing. So now that's love. So she'll pick the guy, and he'll beat the kid, and she'll do nothing. It's very predictable and very hard to stop it because you're going against everything that you think is normal. You know, I mean, if you grew up in a family and then like you don't eat meat and your whole life you're eating vegetarian and then you go to a family that eats meat, that's a hard change. And that's a very simple change compared to what we're talking about. It's gross, and in other words, it's physical. Yeah, meat, no meat. This is such a subtle thing. You don't realize that that's your value system, you know, until it gets, somebody challenges you and says, this has got to stop. And you start defending your abuser. Anything else? No other questions? Okay. So now we're going to page 7, taking your psychological pulse. It's not always easy to figure out whether your parents are or were toxic. A lot of people have difficult relationships with their parents. That alone doesn't mean your parents are emotionally destructive. Many people find themselves struggling on the cusp, questioning whether they were mistreated or whether they're being like overly sensitive, you know? That comes to a point when you're like, I mean, was it really that bad? No, it wasn't like that, you know? I'm just being sensitive. I'm being overly sensitive. I had a good childhood. Mom and dad were not abusive. That's what everybody wants to believe. Nobody wants to go, oh my God, they were abusive, they were horrible, they were a monster. You know, nobody wants to believe that. So our tendency is gonna, when we start digging into this, to want to go, they weren't that bad, you know? I'm just overanalyzing, you're being overly sensitive. So this therapist designed this questionnaire, this following questionnaire, to help you take the first steps toward resolving that struggle. Some of these questions may make you feel anxious or uncomfortable. That's okay. It is always difficult to tell ourselves the truth about how much our parents may have hurt us. Although it might be painful, an emotional reaction is perfectly healthy. And for the sake of simplicity, these questions refer to parents in the plural, even though your answers may apply to only one parent. So what I want to say about this is that if you answer these 8 questions, this is also, I'll show you here, Babaji underlined all of these when he read this book originally, all these 8 questions, and he said to me back then, we should make a survey on that. So that's a survey we made this week. The survey that I posted on the parenting style, pinpoint the parenting style. We read these, then we said, let's make it our own and let's make it scenarios, let's go deeper. But that was our inspiration from this. And what I want to say about this idea that when you're hearing these topics or when you're taking the survey, she was saying, you may feel anxious, you may feel uncomfortable. And she said it's difficult to tell ourselves the truth about how much our parents may have hurt us. So what I want to say is that the person who's feeling uncomfortable or anxious is not you, the adult who's like in the world and doing fine. It's actually your inner child. Your inner child is the wounded part of you, the one who got hurt by mom and dad. And that part is shaking in their boots going, no, I don't want to hear this. That's not what we agreed on. In order for me to survive in this family, in my childhood, I'm the bad kid. And dad was right. I deserve to be put in line. I deserve to be punched in the face with the belt or slapped around or pushed down the stairs. I deserve that. I need to be kept in line because I'm a bad kid. That is what your inner child believed if you're going through any kind of abuse by mom or dad, physical, sexual, or verbal. Or emotional, any abuse at all. In order to survive in your childhood, you have to believe it from your parents' point of view. So it's that you're a bad kid, that you're causing problems for them, you're such a headache, they've done so much after all they've done for you. How could you act like this? You deserve this abuse. So it's very hard. So that's what the anxiety is, just so we can pinpoint it very precisely in the Vedic psychology terminology. It's not only a samskara, it's your inner child who's shaking and saying, no. Don't expose my mom or dad. Because if I tell mom and dad that you were bad, they're going to beat me more. And I want to survive. And in some way, I'm kind of getting love from them if I go along with this plan. So I'm not going to press it. Don't press it. Don't push it. And now you're coming in and you're going to expose them. And they're going to freak out and it's going to be on me. So don't do that. So that's what the uncomfortableness is. That's what the shaking is. So when you see it that way, you can say, well, wait a minute. I'm their parent now. And I can nurture them. And I can say, yes, of course you're feeling anxious. Of course you're feeling uncomfortable. But you're with me now. You're not in that home. You're not being controlled by those parents. You're safe with me. And I'm answering these questions to help you. So we can heal something that happened a long time ago that hurt you. And that's still making you feel uncomfortable in some relationships and not be able to have the deep, loving relationships you want because of what happened a long time ago. But you're safe with me, and mom and dad can't get you like they did because I won't let them because I'm your mom, I'm your dad now. So that's the way to do it when you start, some uncomfortable feelings come, to know clearly, the ahankara is about your identity, right? So to know, I'm this inner child's mother or father, but I'm not the inner child. The inner child is the wounded part of me that I'm healing now. Then you cannot get so triggered and get overwhelmed by those feelings. You can validate them, but you're not the feelings and you're not the inner child. You're the loving, authoritative parent. That's also a thing you can do over this week. Study the authoritative parent type on the website we made and say, okay, I want to be like that for myself, for my inner child now. And so that means you're always nurturing their feelings and explaining to them, but also making boundaries with them, and saying, well, this is what's healthy. Because some of these parenting types didn't do any boundaries. Sometimes they were too strong, so you want some structure for them, but also a lot of kindness and compassion and explaining, just like I explained this. We're going to take this survey. You don't have to take it. You're just my inner child. You can just sit on my lap, have ice cream, but I'm going to answer these questions so I can learn something about what happened to you, in your childhood before I got you. Okay? So I'm going to leave it there. What I'd encourage you to do this week, if you've had enough already, I understand. It's a lot. So one thing could be just take a breather and let it all sink in. Fine. If you want more, if you're like, okay, we're just getting started, it depends on what's going on with you and how ready you are to do it. If you want to do more, you can take on our website, the Vedic Psychology Institute, the Parenting Style Survey. If you haven't taken it, Or you can take it again, you can take it once for your relationship with mom, take the same survey again for a relationship with dad, so you can see each of their parenting styles. And then you can also look on the little videos I made that I posted on the discussion board in Kajabi. You can watch what the prototype is, what personality type comes out of having that parenting type, you know? And then today I posted the one of what the mother's point of view is, the neglectful mother's point of view is of their kid. It's like, OMG. I've heard it all being a therapist. I've heard all that and more. You know, so that's why it's good to be able to see. They'll never tell you it that directly, but they'll tell the therapist. And that's why you don't get very far with a lot of the parents, with the kids. Because they're like, you know, you can see it. But anyway, so that's what I would say to do this week, to use for introspection. And if, you know, you have questions, you can also share your insights and questions on the discussion board, what's coming up for you. And I would highly encourage anyone who's really getting into it to, if you don't already have a therapist, get a therapist, because the therapist can take this and go deep with you and nurture you in a way that you deserve. You don't have to go this alone. That's the whole role of the therapist, to be compassionate, to be loving and kind, and help you feel seen and heard. And sometimes I find that people who don't go for the therapy, it's because they don't think they deserve it. It's the same self-worth issue. That's too much money. You know, why should I spend money on that? It's like, it's your whole personality. You know, you deserve someone to hear you. You know, you can send the bill to mom and dad. They should have done it, you know, but it needs to be done. You need to be loved. You need to be nurtured, and you deserve it. So go for it. Okay? Haribo. One question. Okay.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. This is Vineet from Bangalore.
Hello.
I really find these discussions very, very useful for me. One question I have, I don't know if it's tangential. You asked about going to to see therapists. My experience has been that there are not a lot of devotionally practicing therapists. Most of them, there aren't enough devotee therapists to go to who would understand the nuances of what you might be facing at a spiritual level in terms of crisis. Most therapists are, you know, trained externally, and most devotees who offer any type of counseling are not certified in any way. They don't have a degree. So would you still recommend going to someone who is like trained and certified, even if they are not devotees?
Yes, I would recommend going to a licensed psychotherapist. And that's part of the training to be a licensed psychotherapist, is that we don't bring our personal spiritual path into your life. So it's a good thing that they are not devotees and that they're not putting that on you. They're trained. It's like if you have a car and you're like, well, I'm a devotee now. Should I still bring the car to the auto shop? Yes, that's what they're good at. So therapists are trained to help you with your mind. And the fact that they're a devotee or not doesn't have to do with anything. But we use that, that's another way to have an excuse not to go. So I'm sorry to say it so bluntly, but I've been hearing it for 10 years. Oh, I need a devotee therapist. I mean, I'm a therapist. I don't bring any of my devotion to the therapy. I'm not telling you my personal views on Krishna or any of that. You know, I'm not quoting shlokas in the therapy. A lot of my clients are not devotees. Some of them are actually atheists. Fine by me. So I'm trained to work with the mind, and you want an expert with the mind. The best types are the ones who do psychoanalytic, because they go into samskara land. They don't call it that. But that's the best. And no therapist is going to be comfortable for you if you haven't already been doing it. It's excruciatingly uncomfortable to open your heart to someone because you had the opposite experience as a child. But so then the excuse that I hear from a lot of devotees is, oh, it's not on the path of bhakti yoga. Babaji's probably gotten that question 100 times a month. I mean, he gets that question all the time. Well, I don't want to go to a therapist because, it's not spiritual, or it's not a devotee, but that doesn't have anything to do with it. What you need is an expert in the mind, period. Your devotion is a separate thing. But what happens is, because people don't go, they end up just going and getting some energy work done, cutting the grass, or they go and dump all their psychological problems on their guru. Instead of just saying, okay, we all have probably not had a great childhood, so we should go to a person who knows how to deal with that. And that's a licensed psychotherapist. And then that's a boundary issue, right? Then if it's a licensed psychotherapist, they're not dumping all their spiritual beliefs on you. That's not what therapy's for. So it's better, it's cleaner to have them just see you for what happened in your childhood, not for your spiritual beliefs now.
Thank you.
Okay, good question. We get it a lot, so I'm glad you asked it. Okay, thank you guys. Have a good week. Haribo.